We will. Do you want to give the intro this time? I feel like I always do it.
No, I think you do great, and I'm totally not prepared for that. So you go with it.
All right. Okay, so guys, Utility Unlocked, welcome in. If you haven't been here before, this is a show that is about utility. We are not here, we are not sponsored, we are not paid. We are here simply and only to talk about the things that are important in this ecosystem, the things that are supposed to be uh, giving us the opportunity for the next evolution of finance. What is that? Well, for some people, it's meme coins. For other people, it's utility. For other people, it's something that's still trying to adapt and change. And we're not here to tell you guys to buy a project. We're not here to tell you guys to go out and FOMO in and invest in things. We're here to show you guys the what it takes to really start to dive deep into a project and really start to learn what it's about, where it comes from, the people behind it, what it's trying to do, the infrastructure it's building, and where it is positioned in today's economic reality. We want to give you guys the same. We want to instill in you and ignite in you the desire to do the same things that we do week after week for you guys. And honestly, if you weren't here just a second ago, thank you, because you guys are encouraging us and giving us the opportunity to literally do the things I just said. So thank you, because without you guys voting on these projects every week, we maybe wouldn't be doing this. So I speak personally, but I'm pretty sure I speak for the three of us. It is something that we don't take for granted. So thank you for sharing at this live. Thank you for the likes already. And guys, I'm gonna be straight with you. I can only speak for myself, but I am not going to be able to cover everything. The three of us are likely not going to be able to cover everything. So if you're a Solana maxi, if you've been in the system for a long time and you want to share your insight, this is a show that is absolutely essential for participation. What you guys give to us is as important as what we give to you. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. And also, if you have any comments, if you think we missed something, feel free to share that. So without further ado, I pass it over to
Yeah, no, guys, seriously, thank you so much for coming in and week out and supporting us. A lot of the reason that we end up doing a live stream is because we love the engagement. Yes, we can post the videos and read the comments, but it's not the same as actually interacting with you guys. So thank you so much for all of the support, all of the likes, sharing at the live, and just showing up week in and week out, because you guys really are the reason that we keep going with this show. So when we start with Solana, we're going to jump into the real world problems as we kind of always do. And for most people, when they hear about blockchain, they're probably thinking about the promises that blockchain is going to make payments faster, or there's available 24/7 accessibility. But what many people may not realize is that for years, one of the biggest problems in crypto was not the actual innovation of the technology, but it was the performance of the technology. And if we're going to be completely honest with each other, blockchains were not designed to handle that kind of activity that the global financial system processes every single day. Most of them are just not scalable enough for it. We lost her. I will keep an eye on her coming back in. But these blockchains, they're just not capable of having the scalability problems for it. I mean, like when you think about... Here we go. Get her back in here. All right, welcome back in. Yeah, when you think about how much activity actually happens around the world, I mean, people are making purchases, the banks are moving money, the stock markets are trading the securities, these exchanges are processing millions of orders, and these institutions are they're moving collateral. So on the global financial scale, all of that is going to require a kind of infrastructure that's capable of handling an enormous amount of information. And the challenge that a lot of early blockchains were kind of struggling with was when the activity would dramatically increase on the network. So whenever they had more users join the network, or those transaction fees would kind of go up, the confirmation times would slow down. They would create network congestion. So really this kind of became such a common concern for the scalability of blockchain. So this was inevitably kind of creating friction for what blockchain should have been able to solve. So naturally, I think anybody that's capable of critical thinking would kind of wonder how they could build a blockchain that can operate at the internet scale. And I think that it's not necessarily building the blockchain that is kind of the difficulty. It's how you it's inevitably kind of how you can support millions of users that are interacting with the network simultaneously. I mean, if you're trying to replace part of the financial system, you're competing with infrastructure that already processes enormous amounts of activity every single day between credit card networks and payment processors. So if the blockchain technology was ever going to move beyond speculation, it was going to need infrastructure that was capable of actually handling real world demand. So that's kind of where Solana enters into the picture. So Solana was kind of built around a very simplistic idea, right? What if these blockchain networks could become drastically faster without sacrificing global accessibility, right? If everyone had the ability to access it and interact with it. They wanted to figure out if they could do it, that they can settle quickly, right? Too slow. They wanted the fees to remain very slow. They didn't want it to be too expensive. And what if the developers were able to build applications that kind of felt more like your traditional internet? So basically, they wanted a blockchain to perform better, because if blockchain was ever going to support payments or tokenization or AI, then the performance is going to matter a lot. So ultimately, whether you agree with the approach of Solana or not, then that's kind of the problem that they were set out to solve, right? The challenge wasn't they wanted to create another blockchain. They just wanted to create a blockchain that was capable of supporting massive amounts of activity while keeping the low cost enough that everyday users would eventually use it. So this is where Solana's story kind of begins. Co-host, would you guys like to add anything?
I mean, just at the time in 2017, Bitcoin had a scalability issue, right? As far as what they were looking at. And then Ethereum was just, gas fees were too high, and it got bogged down. So they were looking at it from an engineer perspective and saying, how the heck do we solve this for mass use case? That's it. That's what they're doing.
Exactly. And I think that part of the reason a lot of developers felt attracted to this ecosystem is because they kind of made it pretty similar in terms of the user application to your traditional internet applications. So I think that there were a lot of friction points that they kind of had been looking at some of the early blockchains, and they said, well, if blockchain is ever going to become globalized and nationally adopted, there are definitely some issues that we have to focus in on.
Agreed.
Yeah, let's go jump into what exactly Solana is. So look, guys, even me, I was guilty of it, but whenever people hear Solana, immediately some people are going to think of the meme coins or the NFTs or whatever popular trend that is kind of connected to it at the moment. But from what I've learned, Solana is really kind of just a much larger ecosystem than any individual application that's built on top of it. So at its core, Solana is a layer 1 blockchain. That means that Solana is the actual base network itself. It really is the foundation that all of the developers are going to build the applications on top of. So think of it like the internet, right? The internet is infrastructure. And on top of that, you have websites and social media and streaming platforms and payment applications and basically everything else that operates on top of that infrastructure. Well, Solana is trying to serve a very similar role, but within the blockchain industry. So the network is providing infrastructure that's going to allow developers to build applications, but they're still going to rely on Solana for the transaction, processing, the settlement, and the security. Now, as I said before, one of the reasons that Solana became so popular was because it was focused on performance and scalability. So in order for Solana to really accomplish that, they use a combination of technologies that are really kind of working together, right? So the network is operating using a proof of stake consensus model. So the proof of stake is the system that is helping secure the network and the validators that are going to stake. And those participants are going to help validate those transactions, right? Those are the ones that are going to maintain the network. And in addition to the proof of stake, Solana also introduced something called proof of history. And proof of history is one of the most unique aspects to the whole Solana architecture. And really the simplest way that I can kind of explain it is I want you guys to think of it as like a cryptographic clock. All right. One of the challenges that blockchain networks kind of faced was that the way that they would determine the ordering in which the events or the transactions were going to occur was kind of one after the next, right? So these transactions that were continuously being submitted to the network, whenever the data was flowing through the ecosystem, right, the activity was happening across thousands of applications. Solana viewed that as a way that we can kind of have that be created instead of sequential as a means of parallel, right? These parallel transactions. So this proof of history is really kind of what's creating a verifiable timeline that's helping the ecosystem kind of establish the sequencing of events before they're actually finalized on the network, right? And this is one of the reasons why they've been so efficient for the ordering of the transactions, and that's why that they can process that activity very, very efficiently. Now, another really important part to Solana's architecture is as I said before, the ability to process the transactions simultaneously, right? So the way that the blockchains are processing these transactions, as I said, was kind of in a chain. It was in a sequential matter. So what we have is the parallel transactions with Solana, right? And maybe the analogy that I can kind of give to you guys to maybe understand this a little bit better is like if you're at a grocery store, instead of having one checkout line with one cashier, Solana kind of has multiple cashiers pushing through more customers at the same time, right? So this parallel transacting is one of the performance designs for the entire ecosystem. Now, another really big aspect to this is that's one of the reasons why the transaction fees are extremely low, okay? Because Solana was engineered to process enormous amounts of activity, and they wanted to do that efficiently, right? So these costs of the transactions have generally kind of remained fractions of a penny compared to some of the other blockchains that, what you can really experience when there is congestion. Now, for the developers actually building products on this ecosystem, this was really important to them because if these developers were able to create a lower cost for less friction for their everyday users, you're only going to have more of adoption for your application. Now, look, don't get me wrong. I think that DeFi is extremely important part of this ecosystem, but Solana really expands into a much broader range of applications and use cases. I mean, their vision, from what I research, is that they're really jumping into payments and trading and gaming and AI and tokenization. So a lot of these services are going to require a high-speed blockchain infrastructure. Now, rather than Solana kind of narrowing down to a single niche, they've really positioned themselves as a general-purpose blockchain ecosystem that really can support a multitude of different industries all at once. But look, like every other blockchain, there comes their trade-offs, right? And I'm sure that we're going to point some of those things out as we go into the pros and cons. I don't really want to get too deep into it. If I can, just a few more minutes, I'd like to jump into the SOL token. All right. So the native asset to this ecosystem is SOL. And this is kind of what's operating the actual infrastructure here. SOL is used to pay the transaction fees. It's used for the staking by the validators to secure the blockchain. And SOL is kind of the throughput for the entire ecosystem as the primary asset of the network. So whenever applications are going to interact with Solana's blockchain, the network itself is going to rely on SOL to help facilitate the activity and maintain the security of the network. So there really is kind of a very good direct connection between the operation of the system or the operation of the network and the utility of the SOL token, right? And that connection and ultimately how much value is going to flow into the token is something that I'll I'm going to get into a little bit later into the ecosystem. But at its core, guys, Solana is really kind of attempting to provide a high-performance blockchain infrastructure that is going to hopefully be able to support a large amount of activity while keeping the cost very low and trying to maintain a user experience that feels very similar to your traditional internet. I know I just yapped your ear off, but is there anything else you guys would like to add to that?
We will. Do you have anything?
No, I think you hit it.
I would just say one thing that you didn't mention,
Yeah.
which I think is actually really, really important, especially given where it came from. And that was that they decided to just do a layer one. It's not 100% accurate, but for the most part, they didn't want to fragment that liquidity, right? And that was the key for them. They wanted to keep it all on the one layer, like Solana network, as opposed to Ethereum that had liquidity all over the chain. It wasn't necessarily just in the Ethereum layer one network.
Yep,
So
exactly.
one thing that's really important. And I think one of the reasons why it became as successful as it did at a very, very early part of its.
You kind of looked at me a little funny when I said proof of stake, and then when I said the proof of history, you said, "Oh, okay, there he goes."
At first, I was like, "Does he?" Yeah, but then you caught. Yeah, no, good job.
Yeah. We read the papers.
Do you want to go into tokenomics, or no, founders? Founders.
Team.
Let's do team.
Team.
Okay, so the team. The co-founder and CEO is Anatoly Yakovenko. I probably didn't say it right. Anyways, we'll call him Anatoly. He spent over a decade as an engineer working on operating systems and distributed systems. He came from blockchain with no background in finance and no background in crypto. He came in as an engineer who saw a specific technical problem and could not let it go. I totally relate to this guy, right? See a problem, need to fix it, create a solution. Very smart. And as Bully mentioned, the problem was time. You did mention time, yes. He noticed that the blockchain had no reliable way to agree on things happening without validators consistently communicating with each other to establish timestamps. That communication overheard was the bottleneck. In November 2017, he wrote a white paper describing a cryptographic solution he called Proof of History, and Solana was built from that single insight. His background in hardware and operating systems, not in markets, and that shaped everything about how the protocol is designed. It is optimized for throughput. The way a chip is optimized for processing speed. Sorry. The co-founder on the business side is Raj Gokul, who has a background in healthcare product management. He handles operations and the ecosystem growth, while Anatoly built the technical architecture. Raj built the organizational and business architecture around it. Together, they cover the full spectrum of what a protocol needs to actually reach the world. And then I also included Jump Crypto because their contribution is not a vendor relationship. It's a foundational engineering commitment. The team at Jump spent over 3 years building FireDancer, a complete rewrite of Solana's validator and software in CNC++. This is now live on mainnet. It is the single most significant infrastructure upgrade to Solana's history, and it came from an outside firm that believed in the protocol enough to build an entirely new client for it. And then Anatoly put his philosophy plainly. He said he wants Solana to be a useful blockchain, not the most decentralized, which it's definitely not, and not the most secure in the abstract, the one that people actually uses, and everything about the engineering decisions in the protocol flows from that stand priority. Do you guys want to add anything about the founders or team?
I just think that understanding the team's background really kind of helps to explain why many of the design decisions that kind of shape the ecosystem, why it makes sense, because a lot of them are coming from really these deep technical backgrounds. So, I mean, it understanding the team kind of helps to really understand that where their priorities line up.
So I got two
Definitely.
more people,
Yeah.
and it's really just building on top of what you guys just said. There's Greg Fitzgerald. He's the core architect and engineer. Background, Qualcomm, which we're going to talk about in a second. Code basing. He helped Yakovenko's proof of history concept. You guys can think of him as like the system engineer. And then probably you'll hear a little bit in a little bit. Stephen Ackridge,
Yes.
another Qualcomm engineer. He's known for helping optimize validator performance and improving transaction processing efficiency. Eric Williams is also there. Guys, these guys are all from Qualcomm. And what I want to, like, for people who don't know, and it's just an easy Google search, why Qualcomm is important, why them being at Qualcomm is important. We're talking about a company that's responsible for like the standards of 3G, 4G LTE, 5G. I mean, wireless communications research and cellular networking, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, satellite connectivity. These guys are literally responsible for exactly the things that you are on right now. That is who these engineers came from, what they worked on, and then decided to leave that to come to Solana as a group. I think it's important that we really stress that this team of engineers definitely come with a lot of experience in cloud.
And not necessarily the like traditional experience though. You know, I feel like a lot of them kind of came from some unique places, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Unless
they're
like
really
we
coming
jumped
from
out.
backgrounds that were transformative to the larger scale systems. So, I mean, that type of networking infrastructure really makes sense whenever you put these architects or these engineers or whatever it is you want to call them because of their background. I mean, it makes sense that they're really focused on the speed, the reliability, the throughput, the performance, because this is kind of what their resume has brought them up to.
Yep, definitely.
Yep. All right, let's go into tokenomics.
Okay, tokenomics. Let's see. The current price, last time I checked, was about $64, somewhere around there, I think. Market cap is approximately 37.2 billion. Circulating supply is 579 million. So there's, I was comparing that to Bitcoin. So let's see. There is, sorry guys, new Solana is minted every day. Pay validator for securing the network. Jeez, I'm so discombobulated, guys. I'm so sorry. Let me take a breath. Okay. The inflation rate started at 8% annually, with the network launched and decreased by 15% per year until it reaches a long-term traditional rate of 1.5%. So essentially they're trying to make it deflationary because it's not. It is definitely inflationary. As of right now, the annual inflation rate is sitting around 4%. That means every year there are more Solana tokens in existence than there were the year before. Okay, so who held what at Genesis? Solana launched with 500 million Solana. Of that, the Solana Foundation managed 38.89%, which is about 194 million Solana, designated as a community reserve for the ecosystem development. The speed round venture capital investor received 16.23%, or 81.2 million Solana. The founding sale account for 12.92% and 64.6 million Solana. The founding team held 12.79% and 63.9 million Solana. An additional 10.46% or 52.3 million Solana went directly to the Solana Foundation. Validator sale participants received 5.8%, and strategic sale recipients got 1.88%. And the CoinList public auction, the portion opened to general retail accounting for only 1.64% of the total supply. That is 8.2 million Solana out of 500 million that were available to the public at launch. When you add up the team, venture capital, foundation, and all private categories inside, insiders held approximately 48% of the total supply at Genesis. The community reserve, which was foundation managed, built the public-facing number higher on paper, but the actual decision-making over the capital sat with the foundation, not retail holders. Let's see. So yes, the full vesting schedule for all of those early allocation unlocked completely as of February 2023. So there are no more lockup cliffs ahead. It's all out. There's also one more detail that Anatoly himself disclosed publicly after the fact. At launch, 13 million Solana was loaned to a market maker under undisclosed terms, and that decision came later. Anatoly has publicly apologized for that. Just a little weird thing.
What was that about?
So I don't really know. There was no, it was undisclosed. So he lent market makers some SOL. There's been a little bit of dishonesty in the project when it first started, and that whole crash with the other exchange there kind of exposed a lot of that. And actually part of the tokenomics of this one, there's still 1.3 million tokens that are in that legality framework that are still kind of not able to get rid of, or they're still locked up, if you will.
Caveman,
So,
what is your thoughts on that?
I mean, it sounds a little bit like what happened with Ripple, to be honest, and R3 Corda, right? So for me, I don't give that a lot of weight. I think in a nascence or an early formation of a new industry, I think people are gonna be hiccups. So for that, I don't give it too much credence. I don't know. That's just me, though.
Yeah.
Valid.
But guys, okay, sorry, Wewo, did you want to say anything else?
I mean, I have a couple. Yeah. So the counter mechanism to the inflation is a free burn. So 50% of every transaction fee on Solana is permanently destroyed. That means that as a network gets used more and more, Solana gets burned, and that burn actually creates a deflationary pressure against the inflationary schedule. So that's pretty important. Whether the burn rate eventually outpasses the issuance rate depends entirely on how much the network is being used. And right now, the network is definitely being used. Solana's application revenue in May 2026 reached $91 million, which actually surpassed Ethereum's $52 million that same month. So there's also a new proposal on the table. It's called the SIMD-5047. This is a governance protocol that would double the disinflation rate 15% per year to 30% per year. If it passes, inflation would decrease twice as fast, and that 1.5% rate would get reached faster. The community is debating on that now, so it's not passed. Okay, and over 65% of circulating Solana is currently staked, which removes it from liquidity, trading, supply. Liquid staking protocols like, am I saying it right? Judo or Judo?
Judo.
And Marinade let participants stake their Solana productive in DeFi simultaneously. And then, yeah, I think that's pretty good. You got
Yeah, you
anything
nailed
else?
it. You
Okay.
absolutely nailed it. I thought I was going to add the last part, but you got that. There was just one thing I did look, guys, and I don't. I'm not. Maybe I'm going to missay this, but am I wrong in saying that there is a two-tier system for validators? Like there's almost like an incentive.
There is.
Okay.
And
I know
and that's
Judo.
really judo.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're hitting it. And I would have to go back. It's a little bit complicated and I was not, yeah, fluently understanding it, but there's definitely a two-tier for judo and it's a little bit of a not a good thing. Let me see if I can find it.
I wish I could see where I did. So since 2024, go ahead.
Go ahead.
You got it. Do it.
Oh my
Go
goodness.
ahead.
Okay,
This is your
so I was
section.
just going to say judo runs 85% of validators. Let's see. Judo
It's called priority
is,
fees.
yeah. Single client, single bug, whole network. Nope, maybe you should go with it.
Okay, so what I have here is I kind of got away from it, to be honest. I was going on. Okay, so since 2024, Solana activity increasingly uses priority fees. Tips users pay for faster inclusion. These also contribute to fee generation, although validator economics have evolved with the growth of MEV and Jito. So that's what I got for that. Yes, the confluence is something that you're definitely going to see in a lot of systems, not just this one.
So,
do you have anything else to add?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And so you guys would agree this is pretty heavily centralized, right?
That is a great question, not a statement. And I think that is partially one of the topics, hot button topics, I would say,
Okay.
with Solana.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things we'll probably talk about at the end. Bully?
Yeah, definitely.
If Solana's network fees are burned, but that inflation is keep the continuation of the minting the tokens, is Solana actually deflationary or is it?
I mean, they want to
Technically,
get to 1.5%.
depends. It depends, right? So it all hinges on usage. Like if for some reason Solana doesn't do its thing and it's having a slow month, people leave the network, then no, it's not a deflationary thing. Solana is very much inflationary, and if you don't have the usage, you don't have the mechanisms to make it a deflationary. So yeah.
Would it dilute the holders who are not staking or participating?
I think in general it would, if the usage isn't up, in general it would deflate the whole asset, right? If you have constant new tokens being minted, people have this misconception of like, oh, they're staked, or oh, they're not in circulation, or oh, they're held, but those tokens still need to be taken in account for price. So yeah, it's definitely an inflationary asset. We talked about they're working on some things, but even that, it still hinges on usage. So
with the caveat of presumably more usage, and if more usage down to 1.5%, for everybody at home, like things like CPI runs 3.8% year over year, right? So there is inflation in our current economic system that we all use on a day-to-day basis. So 1.5% actually, technically speaking, is actually very good compared to what we're used to.
But so as of right now, we're not down to that 1.5%. We're trying to get down there, but as we sit right now, Solana is at 4% inflation a year. So we're not quite where they want to be, but yeah, that's their goal, is to get down to 1.5%. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, very good.
Thank you. All right, boys and girls.
Dun 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 dun.
We reached the moment. Sit back, relax, grab a coffee. Here we come. 2017. Yakovenko published the first draft of what became Proof of History. The project, she already talked about it, he did Bully. The project initially operated under a different name before there was ever a Solana. There was actually something called Loom. The name change occurred before public launch because of a naming conflict with another blockchain. Man, that blockchain must feel really crappy. The reason they called it Solana was because of Solana Beach, which is a small surfing town where several of the founders spent their time while at Qualcomm. They had one question in mind. Bully already said it. How do you build a blockchain that scales to the speed of the internet? At the time, Bitcoin had high fees and scalability debates. Ethereum had congestion and bottlenecks and insane gas fees. And Sol was going to answer all of that. At least that was the premise. In 2018, it was the year that the idea became real. White papers, founders were up next, and the testnet in February. And the testnet. Let's try that again. In 2018, the year was the year that the idea became real. White papers, founders, and up next was the testnet. And in February, the first prototype was released. Solana proved it could process roughly 10,000 transactions per second, a massive leap beyond what Bitcoin and Ethereum could do at that time. The core founders, they had their win. One in particular, I named him already, Stephen Ackridge. He figured out that instead of having the blockchain do all the heavy lifting, that they could use computer graphic cards to check transactions much faster, establishing a core Solana belief. As computer hardware gets faster, Solana should get faster too. Some historical tokenomics analysts show that Solana sold, this is in 2018, 79.25 million SOL at 4 cents each during its 2018 seed sale. And that works out to roughly 3.17 million raised at the time. Not a lot of people talk about that, but they did do that on like the side. 2019, I dub it the laying the foundation, quite literally. Solana Foundation was founded. A lot of people mix up Solana Labs and Solana Foundation. Solana Labs, guys, is a for-profit company based out of California. They build the technology. Whereas Solana Foundation is a Swiss nonprofit. It runs grant programs. It supports the validators. It oversees the ecosystem growth and decentralization efforts. And it manages much of the Solana brand and community initiatives. Meanwhile, the team at Labs spent much of the early 2019 stress testing the network and refining the architecture. Major components being tested included Proof of History, which Bully talked about, the Tower BFT, Turbine, Gulfstream, and Sea Level. One of the most important events of 2019 was the launch of Tour de Sol. Basically, guys, it was validators competed performance tests to run nodes, find bugs, stress test the network, and improve the decentralization. This became Solana's first serious community building initiative and helped attract future validators before mainnet. Now, if you're going to build it, you're going to need money. So Solana raised 20 million in a Series A round led by Multicoin Capital. Other investors included Block Tower Capital, Foundation Capital, Neo Global Capital, Passport Capital, and Rockway Ventures. This funding allowed Solana to expand engineering efforts and push towards mainnet. The industry was becoming obsessed with, at the time, the industry was becoming obsessed with sharding, with side chains and layer twos.
I'm sorry, what did you just say?
Sharding.
One more time, brother.
No, you know what I'm saying. Solana took the opposite approach, guys. They wanted to make the layer one fast enough that you don't need those side chains or those layer twos, or the word that Bully wants me to say over and over and over again. 2020, March 16th, Solana launched mainnet beta. Shortly after the launch, Solana conducted a public token auction through CoinList. The token sale was approximately 22 cents per SOL. Can you guys imagine buying Solana at 22 cents?
Yo.
Where was I? Compared to today's valuation, this became one of the most successful Layer 1 launches in crypto history. One of Solana's first major crypto partnerships came from Chainlink. Chainlink integrated with Solana to provide Oracle data, and this allowed future applications to access price feeds, market data, off-chain information, and this was critical because DeFi cannot function properly without reliable external data. They brought on USDC, which gave Solana dollar liquidity, trading pairs, stable settlement assets, and without stablecoins, DeFi ecosystems would have struggled to grow. The biggest ecosystem event of 2020 was, remember this word, Serum, S-E-R-U-M. They entered the picture and became Sol's flagship DeFi project. They attempted to build central limit order books, high-speed trading, exchange-grade performance, and directly on-chain. This was arguably the first major proof that Solana could support sophisticated financial applications. 2020 marked the beginning of the developer ecosystem as well. Projects started experimenting with wallets, with DeFi protocols, with infrastructure, and trading applications. 2021, Solana exploded on the global stage. This is probably when most of us probably started listening about or hearing about Solana. And this is where a lot of us who aren't in Solana's ecosystem or aren't invested in Solana are probably like, this is where you get your narratives from. Sol had risen nearly 12,000% from the start of the year. Market cap peaked around 74 billion. NFTs exploded. DeFi TVL reached billions. Venture capital, obviously they're going to pour in, and Solana became Ethereum's most talked about challenger. June 21, a name that we always talk about, Andreessen Horowitz and Polychain Capital led a $314 million private token sale for Solana Labs. And 2021 was Solana's first major DeFi year. Major protocols emerged: Ethereum, Radium, Mango Markets, Orca. The DeFi ecosystem grew from almost nothing into billions of dollars in TVL. For the first time, people weren't just holding Sol, they were borrowing, they were lending, they were trading, and they were earning yield. Then came the arrival of NFTs. Solana became a major NFT chain. That's what everybody started talking about. There was the Degenerate Ape Academy, there was Aurori, and there were Solpunks. The low fees made Solana attractive compared with Ethereum, where an NFT minting could cost hundreds of dollars. So why would you go spend hundreds of dollars when you could just come on Solana? By late 2021, NFTs had become one of the primary driver of Solana adoption. And then Outages, a decentralized music streaming and sharing platform built on blockchain tech, migrated over to Solana to improve its scalability. It was one of the first major consumer-facing applications to publicly adopt Solana. With the eyeballs and liquidity coming in leaps and bounds, cross-chain connectivity was inevitable. Wormhole connected Solana to Ethereum and other ecosystems. This allowed for assets to move between chains, liquidity to enter Solana, and users to bridge capital, because without bridges, ecosystems would have remained isolated. Now, as for stablecoins and developer growth, it continued to accelerate. Hackathons became major growth engines. The Solana Foundation heavily funded ecosystem development through grants, and accelerator programs supported by the first Breakpoint conference, which helped establish Solana's identity and the community. Developers, founders, investors, and ecosystem projects gathered around and shared vision of scaling blockchain and adoption. To put it mildly, Solana was on fire. January 2021, it was at $1 to $2, and it peaked $260 by the end of the year. But not everything was smooth. September 14th saw the first major outage. Massive transaction volume hit the network. Validators lost consensus. The chain effectively stopped producing blocks. The outage, it lasted approximately 17 hours. The network required validator coordination to restart, and critics said, this proves Solana is not decentralized enough. At least that's what they were saying. In 2022, this was the year that Solana got punched over and over and over and over again. It was a dark time. Winter had come. Hold on to your pants because the list is insanely crazy. The fact that they still exist, the fact that they could go through 2022 and still be a dominant ecosystem, that's in my opinion is all you need. But don't believe me. Here it is. It starts off with one of the largest hacks in crypto history, Wormhole, Solana's primary bridge to Ethereum. It suffered an exploit that allowed an attacker to mint 120,000 wrapped ETH without properly locking the collateral. Approximately 325 million was affected. At the time, Wormhole was Solana's largest bridge, a major source of liquidity, a critical infrastructure for DeFi. The hack shook confidence in Solana's ecosystem. Good news though, Jump Crypto stepped in and replenished the funds, preventing a catastrophic liquidity crisis. In May, Terra Luna collapsed. The collapse of Terra and UST triggered a market-wide crypto meltdown. Billions of dollars evaporated across the industry. And Solana wasn't the cause, but it was heavily affected. SOL price fell sharply. DeFi, TVL declined, and risk appetite disappeared. Not to be outdone, by May 31st, Solana experienced another major outage. A bug caused consensus issues, and the chain stopped producing blocks for about 4.5 hours before validators coordinated a restart. This reignited the criticism that Solana is fast, but it's unreliable. August 2022, the Slope wallet hack. Over 9,000 wallets were compromised. Initially, many people thought Solana itself had been hacked, but after investigation, the issue was traced to the wallet provider Slope, which improperly handled private key information, and approximately $8 million was stolen, but it wasn't Solana's fault. In June, Solana Mobile announced during Breakout, it should have been a good thing, but one of the most, and it in the end was, because it was one of the most interesting long-term developments that happened in Solana, but the Saga phone and the Solana mobile stack, at the time, people just mocked the idea. In October, Solana's flagship DeFi protocol, Mango Market, was exploited. They suffered a manipulation hack. The attacker artificially inflated the value of a collateral and extracted approximately $117 million. And why did this matter? Well, the exploit highlighted the risk of an Oracle design, of collateral models, and DeFi leverage. And October saw yet another network outage. Solana experienced another outage due to validator consensus bug, and the chain was offline for roughly 6 hours. November 2022, FTX collapses. This was the defining event of the year for Solana. If they didn't have a bad year so far, November was going to make it real bad. Why? Well, we all know by now that the bankruptcy of FTX happened after a liquidity crisis, which exposed major issues in the company's balance sheet. And this was systematically bad for the entire market. But what we forget, or we may not know, is that FTX and Alameda were deeply connected to the Solana ecosystem. Major investors, major SOL holders, backers of Serum, which is what I told you guys, remember this name. And because Serum depended heavily on FTX infrastructure and keys, the project became effectively unusable after the FTX collapse. But an interesting side note for me, The community later forked the code base and created what became Open Book. This is actually one of the first major example of Solana's community surviving without FTX. Because at the time, FTX was major liquidity providers, and when FTX collapsed, excuse me, confidence evaporated, liquidity disappeared, ecosystem projects were threatened, and Sol's price just collapsed. It fell 94% during 2022, making it one of the worst performing major crypto assets of that year. At one point, Sol traded at around $8, and many analysts publicly declared that Solana was finished. And guys, they were wrong. NFTs continued growing. Projects such as DGods, YOOTS, Mad Lads continued attracting communities. Developers actually stayed at Solana. Despite price destruction, Solana remained one of the largest developer ecosystems in crypto. Validator network expanded. Even Google Cloud got involved. Google Cloud announced validator support and blockchain infrastructure involvement. This is one of Solana's first major big tech relationships. 2023 was about proving that Solana wasn't dead. In fact, 2023 became one of the greatest comeback stories in crypto. By the end of 2023, Sol had rallied 900%. Developer activity remained among the highest in crypto. NFTs were thriving. Fire Dancer was unveiled. Visa chose Solana for stablecoin settlement. Shopify integrated Solana Pay. The ecosystem was growing again. And it started in April with the launch of the adoption of Bonk, because it brought new wallets, new users, new transactions, new activity back on chain. Bonk actually helped get people using Solana again when most of the market had written the chain off. Mad Lads NFT also launched, one of the biggest NFT events in Solana history. The launch of the NFT collection Mad Lads caused enormous demand and network activity. And in May, Solana's Saga smartphone, the one that everyone is like complaining about and whining about, well, they began shipping out. Most of crypto mocked it, but later in the year, Bonk rewards attached to Saga devices made them unexpectedly very, very popular. And then in August, Shopify integrated Solana Pay, allowing merchants to accept USDC payments directly through Solana. This gave Solana exposure to millions of merchants globally and became one of the strongest merchant payment narratives in crypto. Now, for the first time, Solana wasn't just talking about payments. It had access to major commerce platform. And it didn't stop there either. Visa expanded stablecoin settlement on Solana, arguably the biggest institutional validation of the year. One of the world's largest payment companies decided Solana was fast enough and solid enough to help move money. Now in October, Solana got that technical upgrade that it needed. Fire Dancer, which I talked about earlier, was unveiled by Jump Crypto. Before Fire Dancer, Solana effectively relied on a validator client. After Fire Dancer, multiple independent validator implementations, greater resilience, improved decentralization, and potential for dramatically higher throughput. This was a major answer to critics who worried about network reliability. And then there was gaming and DePIN growth. 2023 also saw the rise of gaming and DePIN. Projects like Star Atlas, Aurora, Nyan Heroes, they continued building. But one of Solana's fastest growing sectors in 2023 was DePIN. Render expansion and Helium migrated to Solana. Helium actually brought large user activity, real world infrastructure, DePIN credibility to the ecosystem. It was one of the clearest examples of major networks choosing Solana as a settlement layer. 2024 was the year that Solana went institutional. And this is, I think, the year that people don't really like. This is the narrative that gets lost, I think. Starting with the Jupiter airdrop, which was a historic event. It was one of the largest events to start the year. The airdrop reached hundreds of thousands of users and became one of the largest token distributions of Solana history. It brought new users to Solana, increased wallet creation, increased trading activity. It helped establish Jupiter as a cornerstone in the ecosystem. In fact, Solana became the DEX trading capital of crypto. Major platforms included Jupiter, Radium, and Orca. And by year end, Solana generated approximately $626 billion in DEX volume. It nearly matched the Ethereum DEX volume of the year. Now, one of the biggest institutional milestones was the expansion of PayPal's PYUSD stablecoin onto Solana. Within months, PYUSD grew to roughly 332 million on Solana. It became a key settlement network for PayPal's stablecoin strategy. PayPal brought to Solana 400 million users, 30 million merchants, Venmo, global payment infrastructure. This is one of the strongest real-world utility signals that Solana had ever received. So it should be no surprise for anyone at this point that by breakpoint 2024, stablecoin market cap on Solana had reached $3.8 billion, up approximately 151% year over year. It's absolutely the fastest growth among major blockchain networks. And meme coin mania for everybody was on full display. Love them or hate them, meme coins drove enormous activity to Solana. Major tokens included Bonk, Dog with Hat, Popcat, and it launched the ecosystem, and the Launchpad ecosystem exploded. One platform in particular, Pump.Fun, became one of the most active applications in crypto. According to ecosystem reports, meme coins represented roughly 40% of Solana trading activity, and Pump.Fun accounted for a substantial share of DEX activity. And why does that matter? Well, critics saw speculation, a meme coin casino. Supporters, they saw new wallets, new users, more fees, and more SOL burned. Usage is usage. And Wall Street, well, they stopped laughing at Solana and started studying it. Announcements and exploration came from organizations including Franklin Templeton, Visa, PayPal. And 2025, one of the biggest retail events of the year occurred when official Trump meme coin launched on Solana. The launch generated massive wallet creation, record transaction activity, huge exchange volume, and significant media attention. For a brief period, Solana's network activity surged dramatically as users rushed to participate. Now, one of Solana's biggest success stories in 2025 was stablecoins, undoubtedly. Stablecoin settlement volume reached approximately $11.7 trillion. Monthly stablecoin activity repeatedly set new records. Solana became one of the largest stablecoin settlement networks in crypto. This was the year that institutions began openly building around Solana. Major players included Visa, PayPal, Circle, WordPay, Fiserv, and Solana saw multiple applications and growing discussions around ETFs, a major layer 1, a payment network, and a digital infrastructure asset. The first US listed ETF was Rex Osprey's Solana Plus Staking ETF. It provided direct Solana exposure with staking through a specialized fund structure. And the first true spot Solana ETF was Bitwise's Solana Staking ETF, or BSOL. It launched on October 28th, 2025. And Reuters reported it gathered roughly 420 million in the first week. ETF applications didn't stop there. They were filed en masse. 21 Shares got involved, Bitwise got involved, VanEck got involved, Franklin Templeton, Canary Capital. It was clear institutions increasingly exploring Solana, and not just for ETFs, but for tokenized treasuries, for money market funds, for equities, for private credit, for obviously DeFi. But DeFi wasn't going anywhere. Major protocols became dominant pillars in the ecosystem. Jupiter, Camino, Drift, Radium, Meteora, and Jito. By 2025, Solana had one of the largest DeFi ecosystems in crypto. In fact, Jito became critical for infrastructure, emerging as one of the most important protocols in Solana. Jito's growth highlighted the MEV infrastructure, liquid staking, and validator economics. And consumer applications, they also continued to grow. The ecosystem expanded beyond finance, guys. Growth areas included gaming, Star Atlas, Nine Heroes, Aurora, Deepin, Helium, Render, payments, Solana Pay, merchant integrations, NFTs, Magic Eden, Tensor. The network increasingly looked like a full digital economy. And by late 2025 and into 2026, Solana was reporting metrics as like this: tens of millions of monthly active addresses, billions of monthly transactions, and trillions in trading and settlement activity. The challenge for some people is the meme coin dependence. Critics argue that too much activity came from meme coins, speculative trading, short-term volume. And although reliability was generally much improved from 2021 to 2022, periods of heavy activity still produced failed transactions, congestion, and user frustration. And as for 2026, I'm not going to get all of it, but the things I cherry picked, MasterCard wasn't going to allow Visa to stay by themselves. They got involved. They launched always on USDC settlement on Solana, allowing stablecoin settlement infrastructure to connect directly into traditional payment rails. And in May 2026, Solana reportedly attracted approximately 716 million of net real-world asset inflows, the highest among blockchain ecosystem for that period. Major growth areas include tokenized stocks, tokenized treasuries, private credit, institutional settlement assets. Backpack launched regulated brokerage. One of the most important capital market developments so far is actually the Backpack, which announced a US regulated brokerage business designed to merge traditional stocks, on-chain assets, and tokenized securities, all within the Solana-based ecosystem. And why does that matter? Because this is one of the clearest examples of TradFi, crypto, and tokenization coming onto Solana. And the Solana Foundation, they introduced native subscriptions and allowances, reoccurring payments, delegated spending, subscription infrastructure directly at the protocol level, kind of like a Netflix-style recurring payment, but can now be built directly on-chain. And cross-chain expansion, it continues to grow. Major interoperabilities include Axelar integration, additional cross-chain messaging systems, cross-chain asset transfer tooling, and allowing Solana to connect more deeply with broader crypto ecosystems. And as for enterprise, it continues to accelerate. Solana's homepage highlights institutions and fintechs including Visa, PayPal, Wordplay, Circle, Fiserv, Western Union, R3 Corda, just to name a few. Solana Mobile, what I talked about earlier, the ecosystem crossed 1,000 dApps available through its app ecosystem, according to ecosystem updates. And gaming and collectibles, Solana remains one of the strongest ecosystems for gaming, NFTs, and collectibles. Recent ecosystem reports indicate that Solana captured roughly 60% of on-chain collectible volume. According to Solana's published ecosystem metrics, 50 million monthly active addresses, 3.5 billion monthly transactions, 3.3 trillion trading volume, and 3.4 billion app revenue generated across the entire ecosystem. These are among the largest usage metrics in crypto. There is your update for Solana.
Those are big numbers. That's a big boy. Wow.
Oh yeah, she's a beast, and you can keep going. I scratched the surface with Solana there. It is definitely an ecosystem that has been extremely aggressive from a developer, a validator, and a founder perspective. It's without a doubt a monster.
So the Visa announcement, that's the pilot for the payment settlement. What would it actually take for that to become permanent infrastructure?
Interesting. I mean, other than just like a green light.
Yeah, I mean, is there kind of something else that they're waiting for production, or is it just really kind of just a test? What are your thoughts on the pilots?
Is the Visa? Okay, so I'm gonna speak not through knowledge, but rather just like how do I say this? Common sense. You, if you're Visa or MasterCard, you're not just gonna open your doors and say, go ahead. You're gonna absolutely stress test the crap out of this and make sure that you are 100% solid in every shape and form. You literally run the world when it comes to payments if you're Visa or MasterCard. So it's extremely important that this ecosystem is solid. There can be no lags. There can be no shutdowns. There can be no. In fact, I forget the metric, but there is a number I used to know on what the droppage in Visa and MasterCard can be. It is an obscene, like to say it's less than nothing, it is probably an overestimation, no, underestimation of that. So yeah, you can't have blocks go down. You can't have outages for 4 hours, 6 hours, 17 hours. That can't happen. So, and this is why we talk about interoperability. This is why we talk about it's not just one ecosystem that's going to win it all. Not possible. Where does Solana win? The very thing that people hate about Solana is where it wins.
And where is that?
The liquidity.
Where does Solana win? What can you elaborate on what you just said?
The liquidity that it got from the meme coin casino, from the DeFi ecosystem. The liquidity that it generated, that it captured, is what gives Solana the ability to pivot.
So let me ask you this now, because I don't know if you guys know how much money and volume is generated from the meme coin ecosystem. But what happens when Clarity comes in and cleans up meme coins?
Absolutely nothing. You already have captured the value.
No, I disagree with that. I disagree with that very much so, actually. So
This is exciting.
yeah, so I really, really push back on that because 90% of the volume, half of the revenue, and a third of that comes from meme coin. And so we talk about usage and we talk about deflationary asset. If you take away 90% of the revenue that's coming into into the ecosystem, that's going to shut that mechanism down, right? So it goes from really being used to maybe not so much. I mean, I'm not saying there's great things happening for Solana, but this has been my issue with Solana from day one, is the meme coin ecosystem. It's huge. And once regulation comes in and it starts cleaning up, what is it, Pump Fun and all these other apps that are generating all this liquidity for Solana, I think you're going to see some changes.
Oh, you're seeing the changes. That's what I'm trying to say. They're
Yeah.
not just it is transforming as we speak. And saw the writing on the wall, by the way. Like they didn't just decide in 2026 that they were going to go more infrastructure, more more like institutional base. They changed a while ago. Is Pump Fund is the narrative of Pump Fund a problem? Absolutely, 100% it is. No, anybody who says otherwise is just doesn't understand. But I don't want to just be dismissive, but it is a real black eye on the ecosystem for sure.
I mean, and still 90% of the revenue on the DEX is what is that? Van Eyck? It's more meme stuff. Yeah. I mean, I think they have some adoption and I think they have some good stuff coming and they're shifting and they're pivoting, but still it's a lot of meme stuff.
But that being said though, I mean, okay, so like I the three of us are not meme people. Sure. So I'm not here to defend meme coins. But just look at what they said, right? You guys want to go into collectibles? You want to go into like trading Mimu Dogdu coin? We're not going to regulate that. Go on. There's always going to be there's always going to be a place for them
But it's
because
not going to be the wild, wild west. It's going to be regulated. You know,
we'll see.
I
We'll
think
see.
meme coins, yeah.
We'll see.
I think it's going to be.
If the regulation happens, if the regulation happens for meme coins, I don't think it'll be regulation for the meme coin. I think it'll be regulation for access to wallets that allow meme coins.
I think you're going
So
to, I think it'll
cut
look
off the
very
access.
different. Hmm.
I mean, do casinos look different? Since
Casinos are,
1800?
they're pretty regulated, and it's very different, right, than meme coins. So, and the house always wins. You know, it's very,
Point exactly. That's my point exactly. So what has to happen? What has to happen is the government has to get a piece of the pie. That's what has to happen. That's it. If the government gets a piece of that pie, they're fine.
yeah. I think, yeah, we'll have to see what happens in the future, but
It's gonna, yeah. No, I agree with that. There will be changes inevitably. Okay, let's talk about. Sorry, my system froze. All right.
Compliance and regulations.
Compliance and regulations. We will take us away.
okay, let's go with it. So, right, starting with JP Morgan, let's do the institutional side of things. So, JP Morgan issued a 50, you kind of just went over all of this. I don't know if you went over the numbers, but issued a 50 million commercial paper settlement on Solana. Franklin Templeton, a 1.5 trillion asset manager, is building on Solana infrastructure. SoFi, a nationally chartered bank with approximately 15 million members and over 50 billion in assets, announced enterprise fiat and stablecoin banking services leveraging on Solana. That's pretty big stuff. On the ETF side, Vanik, 21 shares, Grayscale, Canary Capital, and Bitwise have all filed for spot Solana ETFs. Bloomberg Intelligent puts that probability of approval somewhere between 55 and 65% in 2026. Cumulative inflows into existing Solana ETF products have already reached approximately 765 million. The SEC has not formally stated whether Solana is a security. In the past enforcement actions against exchanges, Solana appeared on lists of tokens under scrutiny. The Clarity Act, if passed, would likely classify Solana as a digital commodity given the decentralized validator set work-based distribution. I'm not sure. So that would kind of remove the uncertainty from that. But I think the Clarity Act will change the meme coin structure of that as well. The Solana Foundation is a Swiss nonprofit entity, which is favorable jurisdiction for crypto protocol foundations. Switzerland has established legal frameworks specifically for these structures. Yes, Falcon. They're being very proactive in their post-quantum signature solution. As preparation for the future quantum threats, the network is actively addressing long-term security concerns rather than waiting for them to become a problem, which is good forward thinking. And that's what I have for the compliance side of things. Do you guys have anything to add?
No, I think you did great.
Absolutely. I think you kind of talked about it before, right? This is what's going to be needed right here is clarity to see what happens. Does anything happen? We don't know. If in fact clarity even gets done this year.
And I don't really even know if I think that they're decentralized as they say. Yeah, I feel like they're pretty centralized.
If all your validators can get together and start or stop a project, that is actually not decentralized.
Exactly. And I think Judo is 85% of the nodes, right? Judo is 85% of the nodes?
To be honest, I don't know that.
Huh?
I don't know that.
Oh, I think it is.
So
Pretty sure.
I was writing questions and comments down.
Oh, it's actually higher than 85% now. So Judo Solana client holds the validator software is 95% of the actual running nodes. That's crazy. That to me isn't decentralized, right? So that's like one single point of failure. That is not what you want in a system.
And if I remember correctly, maybe it was Binance and Coinbase, the SEC had labeled Solana apart with other assets as a security, and then they later revoked that.
Yeah, so they have been, that is very true, Bully. They were under scrutiny. They were definitely in the talks, of that stuff. So I'm not really even sure that, so that's the key factor with commodity versus security is it truly decentralized, and will they see that it is decentralized? I'm not so sure. And I think that's why they were kind of being,
So the U.S.
scrutinized
regulatory
before.
position for Solana is a digital commodity. It's not classified as security under the 2026 SEC CFTC framework.
That's good.
Yeah, so I think the SEC stance on a lot of things changed with the new administration, but I thought it was Coinbase and Bitwise maybe in their lawsuit. It was mentioned, but it seems like they actually looked at it and figured that one out.
Is it time for the TAM? The TAM?
Yeah.
Your mic's muted.
Okay, let me pull it up on my screen. Where are my photos? Okay. So look, guys, Solana, just like a couple of the last projects that we've been focusing on, they're not really just focused on a single market, right? They're trying to provide infrastructure for multiple industries at the same time. So whenever we're evaluating an investment opportunity, one of the first questions we should be asking ourselves is, how big is this opportunity? So let's go through it part by part, right? We're going to start with payments. The global payments industry is currently processing just about $1.8 quadrillion every single year around the world. We'll jump into stablecoins, right? Stablecoins processed $33 trillion in 2025, and that's at about just a 72% increase year over year, right? So the stablecoins alone already surpassed the annual processed volume of the largest payment networks in the world, like Visa, MasterCard. Stablecoins are 72% a year, is a staggering number. We could jump into tokenization, right? And this is one of those areas, you're getting massive attention from institutions. They want to tokenize stocks, they want to tokenize bonds, they want to tokenize treasuries, money market funds, everything, right? They want all of this represented on chain. Now, really kind of depending where you're looking at, there are estimates for the tokenization demand to kind of sit somewhere between $5 trillion to $30 trillion in tokenized assets over the next decade. It really kind of depends on your sources for that. When we jump into finance, right? The global financial system is measured in the hundreds of trillions of dollars, right? When you're combining equities and bonds and the credit market and derivatives and all different types of financial assets, you're looking at hundreds of trillions of dollars. Gaming, currently about $200 billion every single year. And then we jump into artificial intelligence, probably one of the biggest technological shifts in our lifetime. Citibank is estimating the AI market could exceed $4.2 trillion by 2030 for the AI market. let's jump into consumer applications. All right, these are the applications that are used by billions of people every single year. The social media, the digital marketplaces, and this is currently sitting at $299 billion in 2025, with just about a 7% year over year volume growth. Now, obviously, guys, we got to be intellectually honest with you guys. You simply can't add up all of these numbers and pretend that Solana is competing for a gigantic combined figure, okay? That would be pretty misleading. But what I can say is that even after accounting for the overlap that Solana is attempting to position itself inside of, the intersection of the industries, we're still measuring in the hundreds of $1 trillion. So if I had to estimate the total addressable market for Solana, I would personally view it, and this is kind of a drastic range, I understand that, but it really depends on how much tokenization and payment and stablecoin and consumer application, how much infrastructure ultimately kind of migrates on chain. But I'm personally viewing the TAM, and I know this is a crazy range, but somewhere between $10 to $100 trillion of activity over time. I know it's probably the widest range I've ever had, but it's really dependent on every kind of sector they're jumping into. If you want to say $50 trillion, we can go with $50 trillion. I wouldn't be upset with that number. Can I jump into token mechanics?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let me see.
How do you obtain the value? No, you're still off. Still off.
I was on mute, wasn't I? He made a face. Okay. Up until this point, we talked about the technology, the team, the adoption, the regulations, the total addressable market. But none of that means nothing if the token that you are holding doesn't necessarily benefit from any of that. So, and I try to say this every episode, but one of the biggest mistakes that investors make is that they could see a successful ecosystem, they could see the adoption, the growth of users, they see the partnerships, and they automatically assume that the token has to become more valuable. But the reality is that the ecosystem and the token are not the same thing in many cases. So the question for this part is pretty simple, right? How important is SOL to the functionality of the ecosystem? So let's start with the transaction fees. Why are you looking at me like that?
Do you know what SOL means for me?
Shit out of
No.
luck.
Yeah.
What did she say?
Shit out of luck. SOL, you're shit out of luck.
I guess we'll see if that's really what it means for him when we do our ratings. All right, guys. How important is SOL to the functionality of the ecosystem, right? Transaction fees. So whenever someone is transferring an asset or trading or minting NFTs or interacting with DeFi of any kind of application on the network, the transaction fees are paid in SOL. So that is immediately going to create utility because that activity on the network is going to require the token. But in retrospect, the fees are extremely cheap on purpose for this ecosystem. So if a transaction costs a tiny fraction of a penny, then I don't think that necessarily creates a massive demand just based on the fees. But regardless, the token is tied to that, right? So that could be a strength and a weakness. The second important part is the staking, right? So the validators are staking SOL, and they're doing that to help secure the network, right? The delegators can also stake their SOL to validate and participate in the security of the ecosystem as well. So this is going to remove a portion of the supply from the circulating supply in order to kind of maintain the operation and the security of that, right? Without the validators, the network's not going to work. And without SOL, the validator incentives don't function either. So there is a direct connection to that as well. The other component that we have to the ecosystem is the ecosystem usage, all right? And that's kind of, right, SOL is really the primary asset to the ecosystem. So that's what's being used for the throughput, the wallets, the trading pairs, the liquidity pools, the DeFi applications. That's the heart of the entire ecosystem. So that's going to create an additional layer of demand because Sol functions as the foundational asset of the ecosystem itself. Now, before I keep going, I want to ask you guys a question, right? That is kind of related to the previous part. If Solana is attempting to participate, let's say $50 trillion, is $50 trillion of activity, right? Does that actually increase demand for the Sol token? What would you guys say?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to kind of say not necessarily.
Go ahead.
So as I said, it depends on how much tokenization aspect comes into it. So yes, there is like an indirect part to it, but the $50 to $100 trillion worth of asset that's represented on chain doesn't necessarily force the direct demand to the actual Sol token itself. Do we have a disagreement here?
I want to go back to tokenomics.
Right, because that the value of the network doesn't mean that people are automatically buying the Sol token, right? The tokenized assets could be stocks, it could be treasuries, it could be stablecoins, it could be bonds.
But there's a gas fee and transaction fee for everything that's on the network. So here's what I'll say about the Sol token is, how do I say this? Solana is the most token dependent ecosystem that I've seen doing any work with any of these assets. They are so heavily correlated to the ecosystem. I mean, you literally need it for the gas and transaction fees. You need it for validator economics. You need it for staking yield. You need it for meme coin and trading pairs. You need it for capital formation. Like, it is embedded heavily into the ecosystem of Solana. So I think, yes, I think that all the value capture that runs through the ecosystem is going to, use or need Solana. And yeah.
No, I understand the direct versus the indirect part to it. Transaction fees require Sol. The network security relies on Sol. The ecosystem is built around Sol as the primary asset. But does that mean $10 trillion flowing into the ecosystem automatically makes the token go up 100x?
Oh, I don't think that. I mean, no.
Right.
I mean,
Okay,
I think
That is where I'm going with it.
yeah, but I mean, for me, that's like that with every asset, though, right? Like, just because you have, right? I understand what you're saying. No, I don't believe that is the case.
Yeah, I mean, like unlike some of the other governance tokens that we have reviewed, where there is very little connection to the token itself, Solana does have a meaningful relationship between the actual network activity and the token's utility. You know, but I don't want people to be misled when they see the stablecoin volumes or the tokenized assets being represented on chain and kind of expecting the token to pump up, because where the token is actually being utilized doesn't necessarily reflect to the potential volume that can come on chain, right? It is suited for the environments that it was built to kind of integrate in with.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that.
But yeah, I mean, generally more transactions is going to mean more fees, right? More validators is going to mean more staking. More applications is going to mean more ecosystem participation, right? All of those things are connected to Sol in some way or another. But I just wanted to kind of get people to understand that there is a direct aspect to it, but there is also a indirect aspect to it as well. Now, here's maybe something that I would kind of want to ask you guys. With the possibility of the network kind of upgrading and becoming more efficient over time, with better technology, better throughput, the lower costs, is it possible that it could result in the network actually requiring less Sol per unit of economic activity?
Say that one more time, Bully.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay. So as the technology kind of advances, right? More throughput, lower costs, more efficiency. is it possible that Solana's success could result in the network kind of requiring less SOL per unit of economic activity, changing the value capture model?
I mean, yeah, essentially anything is possible. The only thing I'll say, I don't think that they're going to. So Solana's founders, I feel like they own a lot of Solana. Retail only owns a very tiny portion of Solana, right? So they really want that to be heavily correlated and benefit, because it's going to benefit them, right?
There's no ceiling.
Yeah.
There's no ceiling. So there's no downward pressure. There's no like, oh, we have to like increase the value of this token exponentially, because if we don't, we're gonna use up our supply. The
Right.
supply is endless. But then
Yeah.
so then now is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. Like how much oil is there in the world? You know, if it's speaking on like things that we all know about. So if oil is a commodity and Solana is a digital commodity, do you like this is where like you know that old like fight that people have on here about market cap? In the case of Solana, its its power, its value isn't in the downward pressure of a market cap. It's in its utility. It's that the value is in the ecosystem. That the value is in how much the system is being used to actually propel this financial instrument, this economy that we have going. If the answer is infinite, or if the answer is trillions, or whatever you want to put in, whatever you out there, then I think that's what's going to determine the value of this token. It's not an endless supply. It's not, oh shit, this is an endless supply of coins. Now, should they change should they dump, you know, 500 billion coins into the market? Would that have an effect? Of course it would.
No.
Ultimately, I want people to understand that the performance of the token is tied to the activity of it. I mean, when I'm looking at the token mechanics, I really do view it as a very strong value capture model, right? I think that SOL really does play a meaningful role in the operation of the network. If I'm being intellectually honest, I don't personally place Solana in the absolute highest tier of value capture, right? There are some ecosystems where the token is more directly connected to the activity itself. Some ecosystems are going to require the token for collateral, right? Some of them for settlement. Some of them, they have a better locking mechanism that's going to create stronger structural demand. But with the Solana relationship, I view it as pretty strong, just not perfect.
Fair. I like it.
So I honestly think that the strength of your investment thesis, if you guys are investing in the token for this project, it's ultimately just going to depend on how much activity of the ecosystem is going to grow and attract more users over time, and then inevitably how much SOL demand is going to be created from that activity, right? That's kind of really a part of your investment thesis. But overall, I think it's pretty solid.
Yeah, let's talk pros and cons. Wewo, you want to start?
Sure. Let me get there. I say the good, the bad, the ugly, but all right. So Solana has the fastest production blockchain in the world with real throughput. The institutional adoption is pretty good. Fire Dancer is live on mainnet. Real world asset value on Solana is 2.8 billion. The 50% fee burn creates real deflationary pressure. The bad, Solana has no hard cap. There's validator concentration of 95% for Judo. Regulatory clarity is still meh. Let's see. So then we have the supply overhang with the FTX bankruptcy case. That was what, 3.6, I forget what it was, 3.65 million. It was worth a lot of money anyway. So the outages is really bad for me. Between 2021 and 2023, they experienced what, 9 outages. And then, yeah, the FTX relationship and Solana's foundation and Solana Labs, when they sold tens of millions of Solana to Alameda Research in 2020 and 2021. That was, yeah, they were kind of more heavily correlated with that whole story than people really talk about. So those were, okay, I'll just read what I have. Those sales were made at prices that gave Alameda, I don't know if I'm saying that right, enormous advantages over retail investors. That relationship fueled the 2021 rally and then nearly destroyed the network when FTX collapsed in November 2022 and Solana dropped 95% from its all-time high. The people who bought at the top, mainly, most of them were retail. They absorbed the losses. Yeah, that wasn't really great, but past is past. So that's what I have for the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Thanks, Wewo. Bully?
Okay. It's one of the largest ecosystems in the industry, right? There's real strong activity between the developers, the users, the applications. Extremely fast. It's very low transactional costs. They are exposed to a multi-trillion-dollar industry. There is very strong adoption between payments, DeFi, stablecoins, gaming, consumer applications. It's a growing industry, right? There's a lot of interest from enterprises and traditional finance. I think that the value capture is pretty strong and designed around scalability and high performance. The downside to it, we didn't really talk about it, but there's significant competition from other blockchain ecosystems with it. The historical outages and the reliability is a absolute huge concern for me. That's kind of just something we have to keep our eye on as long as they continue the updating. Maybe it won't be that bad of an issue. The decentralized debates, it depends if that's kind of a part of your ideology. And possible regulatory uncertainty depending on jurisdictions because they are in such an expansive different types of use case between gaming, DeFi, AI. That's probably going to be different in the United States versus Europe versus China. So maybe that could save them. It could also be a con because they're so vastly expanded between multiple industries.
Thank you, Bully. This is where I talk about 3 ways to evaluate a crypto project using other things than market cap, Metcalfe's law, MVT ratio, and the velocity model. So Metcalfe's law is the more people who use a network, the more useful and valuable it becomes for everyone on it. So the rating I gave was a 9 out of 10 for Metcalfe's law. Why? Well, because of the huge developer ecosystem, massive user base, strong stablecoin activity. The network effects are real on Solana. The more users that attract, the more liquidity, the more developers, the more applications. It's just 1 + 1 is 2 on this one. MVT ratio. MVT ratio, for people who don't know, is network value to transactions. In simple terms, it's like a PE ratio for cryptocurrency. It compares how much the network is worth to how much it's actually being used. Now, a high MVT, the crypto's value may be growing faster than its real usage, which can suggest it's expensive relative to activity. A low MVT ratio, the network may be seeing a lot of transaction activity compared to its value, which can suggest it's relatively undervalued. The rating I gave for that was an 8 out of 10. The strengths is real economic activity, stablecoin usage, there's payments, and obviously DeFi. Weakness, some activity is driven by bots and a speculative market. So that's why I gave it a little bit lower rating. Velocity model, It measures how quickly money moves around a network. For a cryptocurrency, Velocity asks, are people holding this coin or are they constantly spending and transferring it? I gave Solana a 7.5 out of that. I mean, the pros are staking locks up supply and fee burning does help. The cons for Solana is it changes hands frequently. Many users treat it as a utility token rather than a store of value. So the total mark I gave Solana is an 8.6. Guys?
Wewo?
So I'll add to mine too. The things that I don't love about Solana is the meme coin thing. It's always just been a turnoff for me. It kind of gives me the total opinion of mine, not, but just like, so Solana's never been my thing. It's never been my jam, never really cared about it. I also think Hyperliquid is a big competitor to Solana. So like Billy said, I forgot to mention the competitors. So that being said, it is probably my highest mark so far at 8.4, but I personally will probably not ever have Solana.
I think we all kind of come to a very common consensus with this project. I'm going with a flat 8. Going with a flat 8 for the project. I myself, I'm not going to invest into it. I really do like the project. I've learned a lot from researching it. Just not something I'm going to add into the portfolio, but wouldn't be upset if you did.
So on the flip side of that coin, pun intended, I would say that I understand that our pie is so big, right? There's only a certain amount of money to go around to invest in. I'm going to say that I am disappointed that I have not invested in Solana so far, and it is something that I will be looking for points of entry.